Welcome to the Leadership Heart Podcast with Sandra J. Horton, the Growth Catalyst. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership Heart Podcast. I have been a little bit MIA, just coming over a little bit of sickness, but I'm so excited to be here. Usually I'm here every single week with some exceptional guests, and the Leadership Heart Podcast is so excited to welcome someone who is truly one of the most inspiring women that I know, that I've had the great fortune to get to know over the last many years. And I want to welcome our beautiful friend, Kerry Gibson, to the podcast. And one of the greatest things that Kerry has beyond her beautiful heart is her exceptional ability to touch lives globally as not only the founder, and partnership manager at SFU for the NEAT program, which stands for Nutrition Engagement Agricultural Technologies. And if I got that wrong, Kerry, when you come on up, please correct me. She is also the VP of Strategic Partnerships with ZiphyCare, which is in healthcare, which I'm super excited to kind of touch on, as well as the president of EcoCentury Technologies. She has touched lives around the exceptional globe. Welcome, Kerry. Thank you so much. There's so much I could share on your exceptional bio, but I just wanted to warmly welcome to the Leadership Heart Podcast. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Sandra. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, let's dive right in and, share with my audience a little bit, because your background is really quite fascinating in terms of its breadth of where you actually are able to impact change. Change in our beautiful Indigenous communities, change on the global platform at the highest system levels, change in healthcare. So, Kerry, let's open. This is a big question, but, how did you get to where you are in this amazing, exceptional life? Like, what made you who you are? Let me just open it up in that regard. Tell us a little bit about, where do you want to take your story? Where do you want to start it? It's always organic, my friend.
Well, I suppose it's incredibly convoluted, but in a really kind of awesome way that has given me so many incredible experiences, allowed me to meet so many brilliant people who have, who I've worked with, who've, mentored me, who I've collaborated with in various aspects. And, it's funny, growing up, it was always, if you need it done, do it yourself. And what was it? And I moved out at a young age, and I had to take care of things for myself. I had to put myself through university. I had to do all those things. And what was it? So it was, kind of a situation of seeing something that needed to be done and then just doing it, figuring out the how-tos. And then when I got into my professional, careers, it was the same way, except for in a larger strategic sense, looking at the holistic picture. What are all the pieces that are necessary to address causation? What is the root cause? Really kind of digging down into things. And, I loved putting those pieces together. And that's why I'm working in strategic partnerships at the moment, because it gives me an opportunity to pull those pieces together from all over the world, see what fits, that is, will make a company greater, make a project more successful and more impactful. And that's the biggest thing, impact.
So it sounds like, your ability to take action is really what's been that key piece, where you're an action taker, which I love. And for many people, particularly now, being in action can be, for some, a bit overwhelming. It can feel like, how do I do that? Going through COVID, many people had to transform. They had to shift how they worked. Their businesses shifted. So do you have any, strategies that you've been able to apply in this very high level systems change to be that action taker, that person who, maybe some days weren't, super motivating? How have you been able to accomplish this level of action?
Well, first of all, they were all in fields that inspired me. clean tech, health tech, agri-tech, food security, what was it, human rights, all of these things kind of come into play. And so it's meaningful to me. And the big thing is it's not about just acting, right? You can't just act and do things because then you're just going to make a mess of things. It's
Yeah.
about being able to sit back and assess, to look at the puzzle in all of its pieces and what is required. Because some pieces you think, it might fit, but they might not. And so you have to strategically put those pieces together in order to make something that is functional, that, all works, has a synergy together.
I love that. It's like really is like a piece of a puzzle, and then at the center of that puzzle is us as leaders. And I'm always inspired by the types of work that you're doing. But I would say that you're a conscious leader because you're very aware, you're very present, and you're making good change happen. Are there any things like in your heart that you have found really mm, kind of that driver to help you really identify, like you said, those key things that you're passionate about? Because if you have too many things, it's hard to be focused and intentional. And I think for many people, again, going through this past journey, these last couple of years, it's been hard. A lot of things have been thrown at us. And how do we get clear? How do we know that we're on the right path, or perhaps
Well, for me, I mean, they all actually work together. My background in clean tech, led to, the ability to understand agricultural technologies and energy efficiency and clean tech and so on and so forth, and able to, assist with in developing the program at SFU. What was it for food systems and agri-tech? And, what was it? And so what we don't focus on here is that food systems, localized food systems are something called food RX in other geographies, and food as medicine is essentially what it breaks down to. And it's preventative medicine. So, I mean, I work in health tech where we are providing remote diagnostic health services, in the U.S. and in crisis situations such as the Ukraine. We have teams in the Ukraine right now delivering, care, to people in need who are, displaced populations in liberated territories who haven't had even the most basic of checkups, for, a year. It's all kind of the part of the same package. It's health, well-being, nutrition. It's just the basic needs. I mean, we're talking Maslow's hierarchy, right?
yeah,
And
it's so true. It's so true. And so, these I always find, and I'm always inspired by amazing women leaders like yourself because there's so much opportunity there. So, in these moments, you have all these great opportunities. How are you able to, because you're very much a strategist, you're looking at these systems. How are you able to invite people to come along with you to be a part of your team? Because it is about leadership. It's about how do we show up in our own leadership style. I'd love to learn from you. Like what has been successful for you and building your teams and inviting that right group of people together to kind of come with you in terms of those visions that you're bringing forward.
the right group is 100% the correct terminology, because not just everyone who happens to have the right resume will fit within a certain team, right? You want people who will jive with each other and what was it and each be a part of that that puzzle within the team, and play off each other's strengths. And and it's not just in leadership for me, it's not leading, it's not like saying do this and delegating. What was it in that sense? It's more about coaching and nurturing and like recognizing where everybody needs to be to what was it for the best interest of the project and to highlight their own strengths.
I love that, and I always come from an appreciative inquiry perspective, right? Where we come in with beautiful strengths and resources and aligning those ideals with the people that we have within our teams. And I've seen that live recently in working, with a large health region here in virtual health, which has been really, really fascinating because again, it's new, it's innovative, and you're kind of challenging the status quo. And you're importantly is you're having to build connections. And I want to kind of dive into this because of your roots, your past experiences, and the work that you're doing up at SFU. I think it's important for my viewers just to consider perspective, consider that connection piece, because I think we can learn a lot from you and through you and the work that you are doing. Can you share with my viewers, in setting up teams and setting up dynamic communities, we have diversity of voices, we have diversity of across so many different dimensions. Are there any lessons learned that, you're like, hey, I'd like to share this because perhaps from, a Indigenous perspective, how does this land? Or, depending on how different people express their voice. I'd like to land that over to you.
In anything you do, it's not only team culture and corporate culture, it's also the appreciation of diversity and culture, and the understanding that not everybody thinks like you. Like, when you're small and you're a child, what we don't realize at that age is that we were brought up to think a certain way by people who were diverse as well. And then what was it, so that our thought patterns might be completely divergent. And what was it, and our way of doing things would be completely divergent. So I think in understanding, just having that kind of empathetic reasoning that, okay, I work this way, and understand yourself first, right? How you work best and what your needs are and everything. Always when working with a team, and then understanding, what other people need as well. Like if you're working, for instance, you brought up Indigenous cultures. If you're working in Indigenous cultures, and you're white like me, you definitely need to dig in and start learning, educating yourself. There's tons of beautiful programs out there, University of Alberta and BCIT and everywhere else. And, and most of them are free, these are just some, starter points as to, where you should think about in order to, before you engage, right? Because in every culture in the world, business is done a little bit differently. Engagements and interpersonal relationships are a little bit different. And so you need to understand, that diversity in order to have successful relationships. And even in business is all about personal relationships,
Right.
and networks, right? And having sincere, respectful connections that are genuine. Not just, oh, these are all my LinkedIn contacts, right?
So in terms of for me, and being involved in community and involved in building communities, champions, and change agents, what have you found? Because you work in remote locations, right? You work in not only in European areas, but also with First Nations and that diversity. How have you been able to train your staff in terms of the nuances, the respect, the humility of building that deep connection? I mean, that's what I'm really interested, that I think many people can learn from. So can you share a little bit about that, Kerry? It would be really great. Thank you.
Well, training and constant growth. It just comes down to empathy and sitting back and listening. I always say, because quite often people will tell you exactly what they like and don't like, and how things work, especially if you are new to that community or country or what have you, right?
Yep.
And like if you were going to Abu Dhabi, you wouldn't forget your headscarf. What we
That's
say
true.
that
Yeah, there's these certain ways.
there's just ways of doing and ways of being, right? You are a foreigner in their, in their place of safety, and you want to make them feel safe. And what was it? It's only just basic, respect, right? You can't blunder in and say, "Hey, I'm here," right? But
Love
it's
it.
basically that, just, for lack of better words, just shut up and listen.
And you know what? It's as simple as that. And sometimes I think what I've seen is that that can be the hardest thing is to, as people are evolving and growing in their own emotional intelligence and their consciousness, kind of my worlds where I tend to hang out in, it can be perhaps a bit of a, but I need to, I want to, I should. There's a lot of shoulds, coulds, woulds, and it's just that ability to take a breath and just say, okay, wait a second, what am I observing here? And then genuinely coming from that place, like you said, of empathy and then building that partnership to move forward. And you've done this very successfully. One of the great things that I love, about you, Kerry, is that you've just this beautiful heart that connects people together in the truth of just building that connection, like living in integrity. And, I just finished writing a bit of a chapter for a great book that's coming out, and it's all on integrity. And I feel like integrity is kind of under attack these days, in terms of people show up a certain way, but then they turn out to be a different way. And, because you work with such diversity around the globe, how are you able to gauge, who you want to be involved with and building those strengths and those connections?
Well, quite often, I meet these people by happenstance in person through
Mm.
conferences or travels or what have you, which is wonderful. But also sometimes, you meet them through Twitter or LinkedIn or and you make some kind of connection. Then you just start to have a dialogue. What interests you? What are your passions? What makes you tick? Why are you
Yep.
working for this company? Do you love it? Right? And you never really know. Like, I mean, during COVID, I met so many like new, wonderful, beautiful people who were doing some really cool things around the world. And it was
Yeah.
all virtual engagement, and so it doesn't have to be you're going out and meeting everybody on the street and shaking their hand, just saying hi to people that you pass on the street, and just starting to make, connection and let yourself be known as being accessible to speak to and to connect with.
I love that. I like the word. I mean, I love the word accessible. Inclusion, the richness of having diverse voices at the table. And the Leadership Heart podcast really focuses on kind of those different elements about learning, like learning about ourselves, learning about others, and then living consciously, living in purpose with intention to be of service, to help others, not just ourselves. And if we're in alignment with our truth and our calling, it's such great joy. And but there's times that maybe in all these engagements, it may not be, maybe the
Some
best situation.
Sometimes it doesn't work out, and if there's
Yeah.
anything toxic about a relationship, you dismiss it just like you would a bad boyfriend, right? We say it's as simple as that, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Protect yourself first, and people who are toxic to you personally are going to be toxic for your business.
And that's really interesting. And have you found, what's your experience been like being a woman who's leading change in, with clean energy and the tech sectors? Like, how has that journey been like for you? Any great lessons learned that for the next generation that's coming up and saying, hey, I want to be Kerry, I want to drive that change, I want to make a difference in the world?
Well, first of all, don't be scared of being the only woman in the room. It can be an awesome, like awesomely funny thing sometimes. I remember being at a tech meeting, obviously like a BC tech meeting.
Yeah.
What was it, way back when? I think it was called BCTIA back then, and I was the only woman in the room. As I back then with clean tech, I was the only woman for a very long time, unfortunately, and well, the amusing thing is that the men seemed to change their dialogue when I was there, like in the chit chat. Like they started talking about, what they were going through with IVF, and what was it? It was unique experience for sure. Like, I mean, of
Mhm.
course, I've experienced tons of misogyny along the way, and if you do, just deal with it, calmly, but shut them down, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't have to listen to it. Just, what was it? Thank you, no, thank you.
Yeah. Call it out in a way.
Exactly. And, make sure that they know that it's inappropriate. But, you can do it in a chill way that, you can still maintain like a distant
Yeah.
professional relationship, but you don't have to endure it, right? So there's just a way of handling things that you'll find your own way of being able to manage. But don't let it, kind of scar you, because, that's their stuff. Don't make it your stuff.
And that's really powerful because I think, depending on where you are in your work journey, that could be perceived as something like, "Oh, I'm younger, but I have this great opportunity. How do I step into it?" Um, you've done exceptionally well with building. I keep going back to this connections because that's a powerful thing here is building strategic alliances. Did you or were you able to build those when you were first starting out? Did they help you, like with the mentorship, with finding opportunities, those kind of things? That's something that I'm a real big advocate is to have a sponsor and a mentor because they're two different things, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if I could say I had a sponsor back in the day, but I definitely had some mentors in my life. I had this incredible woman. He was a senior trade commissioner. Was it for Canada? And she used to always give me the best advice, and
Mm.
she was very frank about it. And I love that because it resonated with me. She was telling me the truth in a way that was straightforward and understandable, and what was it, and then let me take that and then apply it myself. See, mentorship should not be hand holding. I've had
Yeah.
mentees called me up to like fix all their problems all the time. It doesn't work that way. I'm not going to do your homework.
Yeah, exactly. That's the truth though, Carrie, because right now I find that like I do some mentorship as well. And it's like, oh, you have to do the work. You
Yeah,
have to invest the commitment, the time, the resources from within in order to actually feel it, in order to then kind of own it. That to me, there's a little shifting happening a little bit.
and yeah, mentees should understand that if you are seen to be doing the work, if you're putting in the effort, if you're doing wonderful things, and
Yeah.
especially impactful things in the community, not just for yourself, but that's when I'm more than willing to help you with your resume, write you letter of reference, whatever you need to grow, and then once you get into professional career, introduce you to certain colleagues that I think might benefit, what we said, that they might benefit from, what we said, beyond me. But I'm not going to do that if you just kind of chilling on your laurels and not getting the grades and not putting in the effort. It's What's the
Mhm.
point? If you're not going to work, I'm not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a powerful point that, um, kind of comes with it. It doesn't have to be age related, but it sometimes is. Like it just, it's just a different mindset, perhaps, maybe is a better reframe on that. It's how do I want to tackle things, the building of positive habits. So can you share some of your work with Haida Gwaii and what's happening there? I would love to have my viewers learn about that. Thank you.
Oh, well, we're just beginning to engage in Haida Gwaii. And what was it? I'm not working specifically in the clean tech industry up there. We're working from the SFU agricultural perspectives and food systems, but the clean energy, of course, ties into that. And that's why the leader from that community, wonderful man named Kevin Brown, is what was it? He's interested in food sovereignty as it ties into sustainability. Like I said, it's all interwoven,
Right.
and it's all one piece of a bigger picture. But we're having meetings, strategizing, like I said, assessing the entire puzzle, and seeing where we need to start. We've secured some funding, which we're excited about. So now we're just planning out, bringing in the partners, who are the other pieces of the puzzle, to execute, and what was it, and having those dialogues. because, Haida Gwaii is such an amazing community. I mean, it's an isolated community. It reminds me of New Zealand, which, what we said, I spent many of my, formative years in New Zealand. And this is what we said. So it kind of reminds me of that kind of, it's isolated, but a large enough population. What we said, to secure various resources, like they're lush in natural resources, and what was it but they're so remote that they still require what was it, just like New Zealand or Iceland or these other kind of offshore what was it entities, what was it fuels and so on and so forth. So it's one of the communities that does not want to be diesel dependent. Well, nobody wants to be diesel dependent. Let's get that straight.
Mhm.
Everybody would prefer to have clean technology, clean energy.
Yeah.
What we said, but not all communities have the capacity to be able to develop the infrastructure necessary to convert and become diesel, like reduce diesel dependency. But they have the capacity. They've got some very bright people there that are leading the charge and putting in solar and wind and like the whole shebang.
It's interesting. Like, so it's a real movement. Like, this is what I love about the work that you're doing. And what I appreciate is that there's a community effort that's coming together to help support this change. And it's fundamental for all of us, for sustainability, for long term, for future generations. So you're taking your expertise in terms of working strategically with partners, funding, governments, communities together to create that positive change. What can we do? I guess that's my important question right now.
Ask them what they want.
Good question. Yeah.
That's where you start. Do you need anything? How can I help?
I love that. What a beautiful reframe, but how simple. And that's the truth. And it's interesting because I find in my experience in working with diversity in groups that, yeah, if you just stop and ask what others want, the answers will come.
Yeah.
They really will come.
Yeah.
Well, Kerry, this has been really absolutely amazing. And I want people to get to know you for all that you do. How do people get a hold of you? How can they reach you in all these different areas that you're involved in?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn, because that's where all the stuff comes together.
I like LinkedIn is a great resource. There's just so much connection for business owners, leaders. To really find that kindred soul. And the one thing before we wrap up and thank you everyone for allowing me to come back. Maybe perhaps it was a bit early after coming off of laryngitis with this unfortunate little thing I'm flaring today. But Kerry, you are just such an amazing woman who, going through the adversity that you went through early on in your life, nothing stopped you. You had this determination, this commitment that you just said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have an amazing, exceptional life. And so, in closing, for people who are perhaps going through a hard time, who are maybe in a place that they want to move their lives forward. They're really keen on doing something to help support the globe. Motivation, inspiration. What would your message be to them? Because you've gone through a lot in order to be where you are today.
Well, first of all, crisis breeds innovation. Always we have gained so much out of negative circumstances. We're talking, just look during how many technologies, how tools, medicines, protocols in the health field alone came out of wars, right? Wars are incredibly unfortunate. We don't want anymore, but look at some of the stuff that comes out and look at that, within yourself as well. If you're going through a rough time, sit back and see, okay, assess the situation. And, you don't have to fix everything overnight, but, what might make you happy? What do you see your world looking like in 5 years, like in your dream world? And, and also assess what skills you have, what resources you have, and how you can put them to work. And if you need more resources, how do you get them? It's just kind of just basic thinking, because once you put all those basics together, then you can pull yourself out of anything. I mean, I was the 15-year-old who left home and still got a university degree, and then had to start my life over at 22. Was as a paraplegic and had to reinvent my life again. So what we said, we do this. This happens to everyone. You're not the only one, and so don't feel alone. And ask for the help if you need it, because there are a lot of people out there, even if they don't know you well. People are generous and often willing to help if asked. But I find in Vancouver, people aren't as willing to reach out. And so if you're that first person to reach out, then you might be surprised at some of the connections that you make.
Oh, I love that, because it is true. I know when I moved here, well, I've been here longer than I have from Alberta, just with age, you have to make that effort. Be that person, be that leader who is intentional, that kind of role models, that leads the way forward so that others can come behind you. And the other thing too, in closing, which I really appreciate, is your clarity on what is driving this beautiful this world, like being a part of something that's great and exceptional. And I just want to thank you, Kerry, for your heart. This is the Leadership Heart podcast, listening to Kerry and overcoming these adversities, but yet making a difference, being the difference, and building connection, building those alliances that we can do things together. And I always love, as we raise our own consciousness from learning about ourselves, learning about others, we then live it, and then we can lead it. And so wherever you are in your beautiful life, know that this is infinite possibilities and opportunities. And I just want to thank you for coming on this. I just really value you, and I really appreciate you and all the great work that you're doing. So thank you so much, Miss Kerry.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I do hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. And I'm going to sign us off. Next week, we have another amazing guest on the Leadership Heart podcast. Kerry, I'll catch you on the other end here. And thank you again so much, Kerry. Bye for now, everyone.